Behind the gilded walls of the palace, a secret decades old has finally come to light, a truth so explosive it threatens to shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. Today, we reveal the untold story of this hidden secret, carefully protected, buried, and now exposed by a woman willing to risk everything, Kate Middleton. Brace yourself for a tale of betrayal, power, and revelation that will forever change how you see the royal family. It all began with a simple white envelope, plain, unmarked, and utterly anonymous, arriving at Kensington Palace. No stamp, no return address, no hint of its devastating contents. At first glance, it seemed harmless, just another piece of correspondence slipping through the usual morning shuffle of royal reports and ceremonial invitations. But something about this envelope was unusual, almost unsettling. The wax seal, thick and deep crimson, bore no royal crest, a strange anomaly. The handwriting on the front leaned deliberately, purposefully, a stark contrast to the smooth, polished penmanship of palace staff. Kate hesitated. Her fingers brushed the unfamiliar paper, feeling a strange, almost magnetic pull. This was no ordinary curiosity, it was instinctive, a silent warning vibrating deep inside her. For a fleeting moment, she considered setting it aside. Perhaps it was a misdirected letter, an administrative error. Yet an invisible force drew her closer, impossible to resist. Her heart pounded as she broke the seal. Inside lay a single sheet of paper. No words of greeting, no explanation, just a document exuding authority, chilling in its precision. At the top, in thick black letters, it read, "Confidential DNA report." The paper trembled in her hands even before she could begin to read, her breath caught in her throat. And then she saw the names. Diana Spencer, and another. A name unknown, yet one she knew she would never forget. Her eyes scanned the cold, clinical lines of genetic data, each scientific term slicing through her mind like shards of ice. The tone of the document was neutral, objective, yet the truth it revealed struck like a thunderclap. A connection, a revelation, a secret that should never have been unearthed. Kate read it again and again, her hands shaking violently, knees buckling beneath her. She collapsed into the nearest chair, clutching the report as if she could crush it and erase its contents. But the truth would not vanish. It screamed silently, invading every corner of her consciousness. Tears streamed down her face, not only from shock but from a swirling storm of pain, confusion, and betrayal. Emotions collided inside her, each heavier than the last, weighed down by a secret too immense to bear alone. The room's silence was almost cruel, punctuated faintly by the laughter of her children in the distance, innocent, unaware, blissfully ignorant. Meanwhile, she remained frozen, shattered, as memories surged unbidden. The sidelong glances from Charles at family dinners, the tense silence whenever Diana's name was mentioned, the whispered rumors from palace staff she had always dismissed as mere gossip. Now, everything fell into a grim, incomprehensible clarity. This was no simple revelation, it was a rupture, a fracture between the reality she thought she knew and the reality the monarchy had carefully concealed. And the deeper she delved, the more she realized that this secret was not an isolated relic of the past. It was a piece of a much larger puzzle. A puzzle Diana had left exposed, perhaps never believing it would be discovered. But Kate had found it, and nothing, could erase the knowledge she now held. The weight of Diana's secret pressed down on her, suffocating, yet she understood that it was more than a relic of history. It was a warning, a message for the future. Diana had tried to guide her, leaving clues hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right woman to understand. Kate recalled the mysterious letters her late mother-in-law had left behind, messages encoded, meant for a single person, the one brave enough to decipher them. With the report still clutched in her hands, memories she had long buried resurfaced, moments that once seemed almost endearing now carried a heavy, almost prophetic significance. There were journals, several, displayed behind glass at a public exhibition in Althorpe. At the time, they were presented as poetic remnants of a princess taken too soon. But now, those words carried a weight and meaning that transcended sentimentality. Each line, each notation, each cryptic hint was part of a larger story, a story that would challenge everything Kate thought she knew about the monarchy, her family, and the legacy of Diana. And in that quiet, devastating moment, she understood, she was no longer merely a witness. She was a guardian of a secret powerful enough to change the course of history. One entry in particular resonated with a chilling clarity. At the time, Kate had smiled softly, thinking it was perhaps a message meant for William, or merely a poetic reflection on grief. But today, the words had transformed. They had sharpened, etched deeply into her heart. Diana was not speaking in poetry anymore, she was speaking to her, directly. Suddenly, all the fragments of Diana's hidden life began to align. Whispers from the palace staff, snippets from forgotten interviews, even casual anecdotes from Charles, all the details Kate had once dismissed as trivial palace gossip now revealed themselves as carefully placed breadcrumbs. Diana had always communicated in riddles, concealing her fears behind metaphors, cloaking her warnings in sweetness, because speaking plainly had been far too dangerous. One letter, tucked away in forgotten correspondence, hinted at a discovery Diana had made late in her marriage. A revelation so explosive it could have shattered the illusion of royal bloodlines. At the time, the letter was ignored, too vague, too elusive. But now, with the lens of hindsight, everything became painfully clear. Repeatedly, Diana referred to the monarchy not as a family but as a machine, a cold, relentless mechanism demanding obedience. A machine that crushed individuals suffering under the weight of its facade. A metaphor that had once seemed cryptic to Kate, but now struck with brutal precision. She saw with new eyes, the polished image, the rigid rituals, the icy glances concealed behind polite royal smiles. Diana had said everything, but only in half-truths, because the full weight of her discovery threatened the very edifice of the crown. And now Kate knew. She had not stumbled upon this truth by accident. She had been led to it. Memories of tense conversations with Charles resurfaced, each word now laced with new menace. Once, over a quiet cup of tea, he had remarked calmly, "Don't dig too deeply into the past." At the time, Kate had brushed it off as cautious advice, perhaps an overprotective gesture. But now, his words resonated like a warning, or worse, a threat. Holding Diana's report tightly, with the late princess's words echoing in her mind, a cold determination settled over Kate, like an impenetrable armor. This was never about titles, crowns, or rank. She was not merely a prince's wife, a duchess, or a future queen. She had been chosen, by fate, or perhaps by Diana herself, to complete what the Princess of Wales had begun. The question was no longer whether the secret was real. It was why it had been buried so deeply, and who else might know. Kate's grief no longer belonged solely to Diana. It was a mourning for every silenced cry, every buried truth, every fragment of herself she had been forced to reshape to fit the monarchy's expectations. She was no longer lamenting the past, she was preparing for battle. Haunted by Diana's words, Kate understood there was only one place the missing pieces could still reside, the home where Diana had lived, cried, and hidden her final fears. Althorpe Estate. Behind dust-laden doors, Kate would find the archives no one dared open. This journey to Althorpe was planned with the utmost discretion. Officially, it was a quiet retreat, a moment of respite from relentless media scrutiny. But Kate sought no peace. She hunted ghosts, not those roaming the halls, but those confined to locked drawers and sealed boxes. When the black gates of the estate closed behind her, Kate was entering more than Diana's childhood home. She was stepping into the only place where raw, unfiltered truth could still exist. Althorpe, a sacred ground, not just for memory, but for secrets. And Kate was here to unearth them. Upon arrival, she maintained a discreet, composed facade, her schedule intentionally opaque. But when night fell and the house sank into silence, she acted. A single whispered word to an elderly housekeeper, someone who had served Diana faithfully in the shadows, was all it took. The woman hesitated, eyes narrowed with caution, but something in Kate's gaze softened her resistance. Slowly, she nodded and led Kate through a forgotten wing of the manor. A narrow corridor stretched into darkness, ending at a door so ancient its handle seemed fused by time. The housekeeper stopped, placing a trembling hand on the doorframe, and whispered, "She always said you would come." Beyond the door, the air was thick, stagnant, as if time itself held its breath. Shelves sagged under the weight of aged boxes, files stacked meticulously. Yet it was the small bundle in the corner, tied with faded ribbons, that drew Kate's attention. There, within the dimly lit archives, lay letters written in the unmistakable, flowing hand of Diana, addressed specifically to Catherine, meant to be opened when the moment was right. That moment had come. Kate approached the first box with deliberate, almost ritualistic slowness, as if tearing too hastily into the past might shatter her from within. Inside, letter after letter spilled secrets tinged with intimacy and fragility, an urgent attempt by a woman desperate to anchor the truth before it could be stolen, buried, or rewritten. Each page vibrated with urgency. Diana spoke of clandestine meetings, unexplained absences, and cryptic references to a man she trusted more than anyone within the palace walls. Between the rough, slightly yellowed pages, hidden photographs slipped like ghosts. The images were clandestine, grainy, time-stained, yet unmistakable. A man appeared consistently at Diana's side, not at the center, never posed for effect, but always present, quietly watching, always part of the moment. His face was unknown to the public, yet profoundly intimate. In the way they touched, in the subtle gestures caught mid-motion, there was tenderness, a closeness that no staged photograph could ever replicate. Then Kate stumbled upon the bombshell. A small envelope marked in bold, unmistakable letters, DNA. Her hands trembled violently as she tore it open. Inside, documents almost identical to the report she had already discovered lay neatly stacked. The same clinical language, the same cold, unavoidable conclusions. This was no accident. This was not a single isolated scientific investigation. Diana had sought the evidence herself, and she had left it behind deliberately, not merely as testimony, but as a warning. The documents alone were explosive, but the most chilling revelation was not what Diana had written, it was about whom. The identity of this man would shake everything Kate thought she knew about the royal lineage. Diana had a secret companion, a figure erased from official archives, yet immortalized in hidden photographs. And the resemblance to someone intimately familiar was unnerving, almost terrifying. These photographs were never posed, never staged. They captured Diana in moments of unguarded spontaneity, laughing quietly, brushing hair from her face, whispering a secret in a hushed tone. And always, always, the man was there, tall, composed, slightly distant yet always protective, ever attentive. His presence exuded calm authority. His features were foreign, yet eerily familiar, the arch of his eyes, the line of his jaw, the curve of his cheekbones. It was impossible to ignore the familial echoes. The deeper Kate examined the images, the tighter her chest became. This was neither William nor Charles. The resemblance was undeniable. It was Harry, but not the Harry the world knew. This was an older, wearier Harry, burdened, haunted, shaped and perhaps even broken by the weight of a secret too long hidden. The similarity was impossible to dismiss. As she pored over Diana's letters, the words became unbearable in their intimacy. Every hurriedly penned confession, every fleeting admission, spoke of this man with care, with protection, sometimes with quiet romance. The playful sarcasm, the public weariness, the wry humor, all gone. In their place was tenderness, vigilance, a deep, almost forbidden love. Diana spoke of nighttime conversations, whispered fears, stolen moments of shared truth. Then Kate read one line that struck her to the core, searing into her very soul, "He carries more of me than anyone will ever know. And because of this, they will never allow him to exist." The words were raw, unambiguous, they screamed from the page. The implications cut sharper than any blade. This was not a mere companion. Not a fleeting friendship born of royal isolation. Diana had protected him deliberately, fiercely, passionately. And now the enormity of what the palace had long feared became horrifyingly clear. Diana had not simply left a legacy. She had left blood. The possibility of secret parentage hovered over every word, heavy, inevitable, unrelenting. That this man had been erased from every public trace, removed from archives, scrubbed from newspapers, scrubbed from palace whispers, only confirmed the unthinkable. Kate's heart pounded violently. She placed the photograph beside the DNA report. Her world shifted once again. This was no rumor. No palace gossip. No conspiracy theory. This was a prophecy fulfilled, a warning Diana had known would remain silent until the right person, brave enough and positioned to expose the truth, came along. And that person was Kate. In that instant, she understood the full weight of her role. She was not merely a reader of history. She was the chosen guardian of a secret that could redefine the monarchy itself, a secret that spanned generations, hidden in plain sight, encoded in letters, photographs, and DNA. Every heartbeat, every breath, every trembling finger reinforced a single truth: the past had called her, and she had answered. Armed with Diana's revelations and the undeniable identity of the mysterious man, Kate knew there was only one person left to confront, the person who could confirm everything, the person with the most to lose: Charles. In the hushed, velvet-lined halls of the palace, far from cameras, staff, and rigid protocol, Kate finally faced him. This was no public moment, no orchestrated meeting for appearances. She was not the Duchess of Cambridge or a future queen consort in this room. She was a woman carrying proof, carrying decades of suffocated pain, holding in her hands the echoes of a truth that had been buried too long. When she spoke aloud the words that came directly from Diana's pen, the carefully maintained mask of the king began to slip. The truth, sharp and unrelenting, poured into the room. Kate had chosen this moment with surgical precision: no aides, no advisors, no witnesses. Just her, just him, in a confrontation that had been building for decades. Charles sat rigidly, the weight of the crown seemingly fused to his shoulders, his expression an impassible mask. Kate did not waste a greeting. She placed before him the letters, photographs, and the DNA report, evidence laid bare as if in a courtroom he had never imagined attending. His eyes scanned the documents quickly before he leaned back in his chair with a dry, almost defeated sigh. But Kate had not come to be brushed aside. She picked up one of Diana's letters and began to read aloud. Her voice was firm, each word imbued with restrained anger, each sentence echoing with decades of unspoken anguish. The more Diana's words filled the room, the more Charles's posture faltered. Cracks appeared in the polished armor. Tension slackened in his jaw, his gaze lingered too long, and Kate saw it, the fissure, the line of rupture beneath the meticulously constructed exterior. He no longer pretended ignorance. He knew what was coming, and the moment to face it had arrived. When she reached the passage describing the man erased from official records, Charles exhaled deeply. The breath was not one of denial, but closer to defeat. He did not shout, nor did he argue. He simply closed his eyes and murmured, almost in confession, yes, he existed. The room froze. The air grew heavy, charged with the electric weight of revelation. Charles spoke deliberately, each word measured, as if carrying the weight of centuries. He confirmed the man's existence, his closeness to Diana, and the silent pact made by those who believed preserving the institution was worth more than revealing the truth. The documents had been buried, mentions erased, and over time, silence had become policy. It was never meant to harm her, he said in a clipped tone. It was to protect the monarchy. But his cold, mechanical justification hit Kate like a slap. She rose abruptly, tears brimming in her eyes, her voice trembling yet unyielding. You let her die under the weight of a secret she begged someone to carry for her. You let her fade while you polished the image of the crown. These were not mere reproaches. Kate spoke for every moment Diana had been labeled fragile, for every cry ignored while she screamed inside, unseen. And at that instant, Kate realized she, too, had been drawn into this machinery. Charles offered no defense, no further explanation. His silence spoke volumes. For the first time, Kate no longer saw a king, nor even a father-in-law. She saw a man. A man who had made a choice, not from ignorance, but from complicity. A man who had witnessed the woman he loved disintegrate under public scrutiny, while behind the scenes, he ensured that the secret she bore would never surface. Charles remained frozen in a cold, silent resignation. Kate no longer saw a monarch, she saw a human being. A man who, once, had chosen power over truth. But now, the decision fell to William. When Kate laid the DNA report before William, she expected shock, disbelief, questions, a cascade of reactions. Instead, she was met with silence. A single, quiet tear slid down his cheek, speaking volumes. It was a tear that said he had always known, deep down, that something was wrong. She had waited for the household to quiet, for the children's laughter to fade into the soft serenity of bedtime. Only then had she gathered the trembling documents, still heavy with the weight of confrontation with Charles, and entered the room where William awaited, unaware that his reality was about to be irrevocably altered. He greeted her with a tired smile, one that vanished the instant their eyes met. She said nothing. She simply placed the envelope on the table between them and stepped back. William stared at her, as though the contents might explode in her hands, shattering everything he thought he knew. He hesitated to touch it, as if instinctively knowing that the contents could unravel the very image of his family, the image he had grown up with, the one he had always trusted. Slowly, deliberately, he picked up the document, tracing the edges of the paper with trembling fingers. His eyes scanned the lines, the name Diana, the laboratory stamp, the clinical results, and his body froze. Blood drained from his face, his shoulders stiffened, and a heavy, suffocating silence settled over him. But this was not the silence of doubt. It was the silence of a man finally confronting a ghost he had always sensed lingering above him, a shadow that had haunted him for decades. His lips parted, but no words came. Instead, a single tear rolled down his cheek, a silent admission, a confession, a recognition of a secret that had been buried far too long. When he finally spoke, it was not to deny. It was to remember. He spoke of nights from his childhood, when Diana had visited him quietly, whispering confidences too heavy for a child to understand. Memories that had once seemed trivial or even sweet were now revealed in stark clarity, warnings that had been dismissed, phrases that had seemed obscure, like, "One day, no one will protect the truth except you." At the time, he had thought he was hearing the words of a grieving woman. Today, he realized they were instructions, a careful blueprint laid down for the future. Then came the anger, not explosive, but smoldering, constant, devouring. Anger at his father for allowing such a secret to fester beneath the foundations of the palace. Anger at the institution that demanded silence in exchange for survival. And most of all, anger at himself, for not asking more questions, for failing to understand what Diana had been silently imploring, for not protecting her when it mattered most. Betrayal was no longer a concept, it coursed through him like poison, infecting every certainty he had about loyalty, inheritance, and truth. And then a name emerged in his mind, Harry. The rebel, the outcast, the brother who had always been pointed at, misunderstood, and judged. And suddenly, a realization struck: what if Harry's fury had never truly been against the monarchy itself, but against the lies buried beneath its polished floors? What if his rebellion had been instinct, a survival mechanism, a fight against the weight of deception that had defined their lives? William no longer wept only for the loss of his mother. He wept for a lifetime of deception, a childhood built on half-truths and hidden agendas. Kate approached cautiously, laying her hand over his and whispering, her voice low, fervent, "The voice is broken, the eyes are burning. Do not let Diana's truth die with us." It was not a plea. It was a vow. As William wavered between duty and love, another presence emerged, subtle, insidious, impossible to ignore. A voice from the shadows, one that had survived the years of silence, now ready to strike. Camilla. She did not shout, she did not need to. Her threat came wrapped in a soft smile and a whispered promise: if you speak, everything you love will burn with you. No knock at the door came. She did not wait to be invited. Camilla stepped into the frame of Kate's private apartments like a shadow, silent but omnipresent, a force that had always lurked in the corridors of power. Her presence was understated, yet chilling. She was not an intruder, she was at home. The moment Kate looked up, she knew. This was Camilla's moment too. I hear you've been busy, she said softly, not a question, but a statement of fact. Calmly, she seated herself, her every gesture infused with the meticulous elegance of a woman who had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of subtle threat wrapped in charm. She glanced at the documents, the DNA report, the letters, the photographs. Then, she lifted her eyes, a faint, almost amused smile touching her lips. You found it? She asked, as though speaking of the weather. And at that instant, everything became clear. Camilla had always known. No shock, no denial, just a frozen, icy composure, absolute mastery. She spoke of survival, of the necessary compromises to exist within the heart of the royal machine. She had discovered Diana's secret long ago, not to use it against her, but to elevate herself beside Charles. She had transformed this secret into currency, a tool of influence. And now, she sat in a palace that once belonged to another. True power, she said, her voice calm but lethal, does not lie in what you reveal. It lies in who you are. Then came the threat. A whisper, soft and maternal, but sharp enough to cut through the tension like a knife. If Kate speaks, it is not just the monarchy that will fall. Everything you hold dear will burn with you. She spoke of family, humble beginnings, media pressure, the reputation of her children, and William, not with tenderness, but like a card played carefully in a deadly game. A scandal like this, Camilla whispered, her voice cold, almost teasing, won't just take down the institution, it will take you down too. A sly, almost cruel smile curved her lips, a warning hidden in a calm, measured tone. And that final admonition lingered like a shadow: the press is always hungry. Never serve yourself as a meal. Kate remained outwardly composed, perfectly still. But inside, a storm had erupted. The threat was no longer an intimidation, it had ignited an unshakable certainty. This was not a matter of family squabbles, this was war. Diana had fought it alone. Camilla had exploited the silence, the hidden fractures in the palace walls, and now, the responsibility to finish what Diana had started had fallen squarely on Kate. As Camilla continued her carefully rehearsed warnings, reciting them like a tired ritual, Kate felt something awakening within her. Beneath the calm exterior of the Duchess, a new force grew, one that Camilla could not have foreseen. For Diana was there, in memory, in spirit, in the echo of her silenced voice. And through Kate, that voice was finally ready to speak, to shatter the silence that had cloaked decades of truth. Before dawn, the first rumors began to circulate. Whispers of a surprise announcement, an urgent meeting, a statement that no one could predict. The instincts of journalists never lied. Something monumental was about to happen. Outside the gates of Kensington, the cameras swarmed, their lenses snapping eagerly, capturing every movement, every shadow. And when Kate appeared, dossier in hand, eyes blazing with resolve, the world collectively held its breath. She did not present herself as a duchess, nor as a future queen. She stood as a woman, carrying the truth of another, long silenced, long suppressed. Her voice trembled faintly at first, a soft quiver in the chill morning air, but with every word, it gained strength, propelled by the presence of Diana's spirit somewhere behind her shoulder, lending her courage. Kate spoke of letters, photographs, and documents exhumed from Althorpe, the archives that had held decades of hidden truths. She detailed the systemic lies, the institutionalized silence, the sacrifices of a mother who had given everything to preserve a crown that demanded obedience above all else. And then, with deliberate gravity, she held aloft the pièce de résistance, the DNA report, the irrefutable proof. Diana had had a third child, erased before the world could even know of its existence. Shock was instantaneous. A frenzy erupted, flashbulbs exploded like fireworks, muffled cries, the media swirling into a cyclone of chaos. But Kate continued, naming nothing, specifying no location, only truth. The final secret of Diana was unveiled, and the monarchy trembled under the weight of revelation. The media tsunami was immediate. Headlines blazed across screens worldwide. Hashtag Diana Final Secret went viral within hours, trending across continents. Public figures, celebrities, journalists, anonymous voices, all celebrated Kate's bravery. Some wept for the stolen truth, for decades of lies now exposed, others decried the injustice, the betrayal of public trust. Yet all agreed, this truth had been buried far too long. Inside the palace, chaos reigned. Phones rang endlessly, crisis meetings convened behind closed doors. Those who thought they could control the narrative had been blindsided by the very woman they assumed could be silenced. Kate, however, remained upright, unbroken. When the conference ended, she turned to William and collapsed into his arms, not in weakness, but in relief. The weight of secrecy had finally been lifted, and the truth, long hidden, now had voice. As the world struggled to digest the revelation, a final protagonist emerged. No fanfare, no pomp, just a man, a room, a podium, and a name finally spoken aloud. He claimed no titles, demanded no accolades. Instead, he began by thanking Kate, not as a princess, but as a woman, acknowledging her courage, her steadfastness. His voice carried the weight of a life spent in shadows, not by choice, but for protection. When he spoke of Diana, he did not say, Princess of Wales. He said one word, Mom. The room trembled. The world paused. That single utterance reverberated like a seismic shift, cracking centuries of composed narrative. He explained his silence, not as avoidance, but as protection. He had vowed that her suffering would never become spectacle. But now, with the truth revealed, he would not allow his mother's legacy to be erased. He recounted years of whispered conversations, half-truths, evasive glances, the constant feeling of being a secret living among secrets. Without divulging everything, he shared enough. Then, looking directly into the camera, he said, I was told I had no place. But blood does not vanish. No titles need be named. Everyone knows. He did not seek the throne. He only sought recognition for Diana, for what she had safeguarded until the very end. The world stopped. The speech ended, but a new era had begun. Reactions were divided, some hailed him as a hero, others trembled for the established order. Protests erupted, petitions circulated, and a storm of media fury swept across the globe. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he disappeared, leaving behind a truth that even the walls of the palace could no longer contain. Somewhere, Kate watched, a hand resting on her belly, a silent promise echoing through her heart, never again will silence protect a crown. The gates of the palace no longer closed to hide secrets. They now awaited the day of reckoning, the day of accountability, when history itself would confront the truth.